2019 Heritage Preservation Board meeting to order. And what we do first is just introduce ourselves. We'll start on my left with our recording secretary.
Kimberly Others, Secretary to the Board.
Pat Cornell, member.
Laura Milford, member.
Carol Johnson, member.
Cindy Terrapini, member and currently acting as the chairman.
Carrie Page, member.
Erica Agello, Board Attorney.
Pat McNeese, Principal Planner.
Thank you. Now if we could have the formal roll call, please.
Mrs. Terrapini,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Milford,
Yes.
Ms. Cornell.
Yes.
And the most important thing of all, if everybody would just take a second to turn your phones to silent, we would all appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I would also like to remind y'all that I cannot hear very well, so if you don't pull your mic up or if you don't get to the microphone on the podium, I will not hear you. So please speak up.
Thank you, Ms. Cornell. Ms. Cornell, Laura, Ms. Milford. Let's see. We have a quorum minimum of 3. We have all members present, so we have a quorum tonight. Just some brief announcements. Well, first let's go to public comments. This is for anything that's not on the agenda. Anything that you would like to bring to our attention, please come on up and come to the podium. Okay, seeing no one rise, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes for the January 14th, 2019 meeting.
If I read that correctly, I see an error in there.
Okay, Paige.
I was not at that meeting, and it says on page 4 that I made a motion.
That might have been the one before.
You
The
couldn't
one
have
I
done that.
have right here for January 14th on page 4.
Yeah, let's see.
Had a meeting since
Since
then.
then, has
Yes.
that been corrected?
We didn't have minutes at the last meeting, so there's 2 sets of minutes.
Okay, so there's 2 sets of meetings. Maybe I didn't get them, or it's
I only have the
confused in.
January 14th minutes.
I have January 14th, page 4, and it shows motion made by Ms. Milford.
All right.
And then on the front page, it said I was excused or absent.
101 gross. I have in my notes that Ms. Cornell made the motion and Ms. Page seconded it to approve it as proposed. Does that sound correct?
Does
Ms.
that
Cornell and
sound
Ms.
correct?
Page?
Did you
Yes.
Does,
She
yes.
says yes.
Okay, all right. So will they'll please correct that motion made by Ms. Cornell, seconded by Ms. Page. The vote was the same, and Mrs. Milford is not showing as voting. That's good, and she wasn't here. I had a comment. Was on page 8. I think it would be helpful to reviewing the minutes later if there was a sentence added or some phrase added that the applicant handed out revised plans at the meeting, and then we decided the changes were too extensive, or something like that. So I think that was why we decided they were extensive, is that there was a whole new set of documents presented that evening. That's my recollection. That match up with everyone else's?
Yes.
All right. So, are there any other revisions?
No.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve as revised?
I so move.
Moved by Ms. Johnson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second.
I think I heard Ms. Page first, so seconded by Ms. Page. The motion is to approve as revised. Any further conversation or discussion about the minutes? Roll call, please.
Ms. Cornell,
Here.
Ms. Milford,
Here.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Mrs. Terrapini.
Yes, so the minutes are approved as revised, 5-0. Before our board attorney gives the quasi-judicial announcement and swears everything in, I just wanted to let everyone know you absolutely must come to the podium to speak and give your name and address for the record so that we can capture all this on tape. It's a quasi-judicial hearing, so we're required to record exactly what happens both on tape and then very specifically in our minutes. But we don't want to act too formally. We want to give you all the time you need to present your application, so there's no real time limit. We just ask that you go through the application clearly. If you need extra time because you have a lot going on in your application, like some of the applications we have tonight, and we want you to have the time to do that. But again, you've got to come to the podium and speak, and we just want to make this process easy so that everyone understands, both on the board and the applicants, what's going on. So with that, Ms. Aguilar, would you please give us the announcement and the swearing in of the speakers, please?
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Heritage Preservation Board acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board this evening wishing to disclose any conflicts of interest or ex parte communications?
No.
Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak this evening, could you please stand and raise your right hand to be sworn in? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So sworn.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to start off with application 18-121. The address is 455 East Turpin Avenue. It's an addition and a renovation of a contributing structure. This was a continued item. And Ms. McNeese, would you like to summarize the report for us?
Yes, and I believe the applicant has a PowerPoint to present up to the board, but if the applicant may be allowed to set that up with our IT staff while I'm speaking, or would you rather wait?
No, does anybody
Mark's
have any,
waiting to,
I'd like to have your presentation first, but
Okay.
I still would like, is there
All
any
right.
object to see
just
the
thought it might be a
No,
time
that's okay.
saver. It's
Okay, yeah,
okay.
we definitely want to see the power.
Okay. Briefly, this is a contributing structure at 455 East Tarpon, and a request for a certificate of approval to basically construct a one-story renovation and addition where there is currently existing what appeared to be a porch on the rear and side elevations of a single-family residence. This would be basically renovating and extending this existing enclosed porch. This item was continued from the board's meeting of November 5th, 2018, and then again continued from the board's meeting of December 3rd, 2018, and the applicant has submitted revised plans. And going to the review criteria, first criterion, the size and mass of this addition has been scaled down a fair amount from the last version that you all saw. Basically, the applicant has now provided a separation from that previous 1970s era enclosure of the front porch that wraps around the house. And the addition is more of a porch kind of appearance, and it's more subordinate to the overall structure. And its width sort of mimic, and the lines of it sort of mimic the principal structure. I believe it somewhat diminishes the 1960s rear addition a little bit more than it is now with the way it's designed. So it does not really interfere with the overall original structure. This is a pretty imposing structure, and the addition retains that feel. With respect to item 2, the applicant has chosen 1/1 double hung windows, single pane windows that are basically the same width as the existing windows, a little less height on that to accommodate the scale of the addition. This proposal doesn't include covering any of the existing original windows, as you saw in December.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you say that again?
The December proposal had proposed covering existing windows on the principal structure. This scales it back and doesn't cover those windows. If you remember that in December, the addition went all the way to that 1970s porch enclosure. Okay, so these proposed windows match the style and color of the windows on the existing residence. They're compatible with the fenestration and sizes of those windows. The door proposed is a double storefront door for the rear or north-facing side of this addition. And the door size and placement do not disturb that general fenestration and rhythm on the north side of the residence. And it's judged overall with the door and the single window proposed on that side that the residence may be somewhat improved with this addition. And the offset placement of that rear entry, especially with that added staircase and handrails, is acceptable as a second entry into the residence. With respect to item 3, this property is located in the special area plan T4A Transect District, and it would meet the district requirements. Any additional requirements would be added at building permit time, such as landscaping, but it looks like they can meet all those requirements. Item 4, with respect to the roof, again, the addition is designed to ensure that subordination to the structure, but it matches that kind of style, pitch of roof as much as possible to the original residence. The applicant's proposing a fiberglass shingle roof to match the existing shingle roof in color and dimension. So that seems consistent. With respect to item 5, the proposed addition is basically integrated into the existing structure, and it is secondary in mass and size and scale. It's to the rear and east side of the structure, and it is pretty prominently viewed from Levis Avenue, but the line and massing elements will be consistent and not impact the overall district. Some of the, I'm not reading the entire staff report, of course, I'm sure you all have gone through it, but a couple of the houses I looked at, obviously the one next door, as the site file form mentions, that is an exact, I guess an exact same building plan, same family that built that structure. So I kind of used it a little bit to compare. And there are other prominent structures such as the Vincent Funeral Home that are that masonry vernacular same period. So that kind of feel is retained with this addition. As far as the architectural features, item 7, the applicant proposes the hardy plank lap siding with 6-inch exposure, painted white, using cedar millwood grain or smooth surface, depending on the area it's used in. Again, this is a visible area, but the scaled down size of this addition to staff actually makes this proposal work as a kind of subordinate and separate feature of the building or function. The applicant for the rear entrance proposes wood frame deck landing, concrete steps with the terracotta tile that's there now on the current steps, and white wood guardrails and handrails. And there is some kind of, I guess it would be tile or red surface coverage on the walkways that are in the rear yard now. The applicant also proposes the brick piers for a foundational support and a picture frame lattice in between. So there are some brick elements carried into this. And with the kind of geometry of that lattice, it seems to be consistent with the rest of the building. If you remember, the main structure looks like, I don't know if there's a crawl space under there, but it's solid brick all the way to the ground. And then that porch addition on the front had the perforated brick around that foundation. For number 8, the overall mass and positioning of the addition is designed to match the architectural style of that original structure and doesn't seem to interfere with it. None of the noted architectural features are going to be interfered with, those noted on the form. Number 9, this proposal does meet the Secretary of Interior standards and the city's guidelines, and the proposed addition will be required to comply with the requirements of the T4A Transect District and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So staff is recommending approval of the request for renovation of an addition to an existing one-story porch to create a family room on the rear and side elevations of this single-family residence. And this was properly noticed, and there were no responses received. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for the staff? All right, we're ready to hear from the applicant, please.
Good evening. I'm Ed Hoffman, Hoffman Architects, 29 West Orange Street. I have a little bit of a cold, so hopefully my voice will hold up through the evening. Ms. McNeese did a wonderful job, actually kind of going through most of what I want to say. You've seen a lot of it, so I'll try not to go into too much detail. We had seen the presentation that Mr. Waters had done at your last go-around 2 meetings ago, and really very much concur with everything you all were saying to him as to what needed to happen. So hopefully we've covered those bases for you, and doing something that's maybe a little bit more sympathetic and thought through. Let's see. Well, what I should do is turn this on. That'll help. You're familiar with the site. Here on Tarpon Avenue, Levis, with the Methodist Church here. The funeral home, referred to Vincent's, is right across the street. Where we're talking about is this area right around the back here. And that's highlighted there in red. As Ms. McNeese said, there's this existing basically a 6-foot wide porch that was enclosed in a very haphazard manner around the original brick kitchen that's buried back behind that. So our proposal is to remove everything you see there in white, the tie-vac, and recreate that. For some time, we were trying to save the steps, those existing steps, but it's really a situation of the tail, wagging the dog in terms of coming out the step, coming out of the door and, and immediately going down the steps. It's not a appropriate way to, and certainly not safe. So we've resolved that issue as well. Here's the addition. It starts to put it in a little more context with the covered walkway that's going to the back, to the alley back here. As we zoom in, the addition, is different, particularly different from what you saw last time from the last presentation, is that to try to respect the original building. By the way, this building, I believe, was done by an architect named Mr. Kelly. I think there are 5 structures around town that, according to my remembrances from my father, who was so impressed with those houses that are around town that are absolutely spectacular. A couple here on the back street, close just this side of Orange, and then another one over on by the tennis courts, across the street from the tennis courts. You can see there's a marriage between the same architect doing all of those. Very, very beautiful houses. As we move around, this is that separation I was talking about, and maintaining the window to bring light into the existing house. And again, a separation between the brick, and not to mimic the brick so much, we've pulled it away to be more of a wood-sided type of a house, but yet it's all sitting on brick piers, pretty much matching those of the main house. So there's a kind of a marriage there. We're creating a little bit of a back porch, and the handrails I'll show you in a moment with a little more detail. This is that side. Unfortunately, the house some time ago, this porch was added filled in with all brick and some, glass block window and that kind of a thing. That's not our project. Unfortunately, that's there. But, so that's enough brick. This is actually an overuse of brick. But anyway, so this is that east elevation of the house. You can see the addition that we're doing here with a pitched roof on top and the openings in the bottom. And I'll show you a little more detail with that. This roof also is up here where it's a hip roof matching a lot of what's already there. And excuse me, for the lower roof, the upper roof obviously has gable ends, but so that also, whoops, where'd I go? Okay. This little porch up here, will be a little bit behind the top of the ridge of the roof line. So this is just kind of puts you in context with what's there existing now. And this is the north elevation of what we're anticipating. These are the French doors and the way the roof wraps around that upper porch from the original, what seems to be the original building. It's also from Levis and all. It starts, as Ms. McNeese talked about, it hides somewhat this flat roof addition from the 60s. This is the stair, the new stair and handrails that will be visible. As she pointed out earlier, the roof is going to be a timberline that matches the existing roof pretty close. The windows also will be matching what is there on the existing house, one over top of the other. The doors will be fairly just simple, full light doors. And the stairs will be somewhat of what you see on the right, although, whoops, excuse me. These are not part of the project. It's really just showing the tile and the way the steps will work as masonry as opposed to frame. The handrails, which are going to be simple, lower, they're going to use the lower is more typical of historic handrails as opposed to having high handrails. And but code-wise, so that's the base part here, but code-wise we will be doing a top rail on it to meet code so that it's high enough, but it'll bring the feel of a lower rail with simple pickets. The siding, I think it was put in the packet originally that it was rough, but we're using smooth siding. That's hardy board, and so that's it.
Will you turn back towards the mic? You're using what? On
Oh,
the
I'm
side?
sorry. I should have put the, yeah, I'm multitasking too much. I apologize. Maybe some of what I'm saying isn't necessarily all that important. But anyway, I apologize. See if I can do better here. That sounds a little better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'll try to make sure I do that. And then the soffits and all are the same. It's all smooth now. We're just keeping the same soffits from around the house. Existing house. The foundation, as we said, is going to be brick, very similar to this brick, the brick piers here, with an infill of lattice. We're not doing the Home Depot kind of simple lattice. So we think we're in pretty good shape there, and so that's just kind of an overview. So I have Bob Ray, and our owner is here as well, if you all have questions.
Questions? Well, I think, I don't know that I'm speaking for everybody, but the lack of questions, I think, indicates that you guys made a huge improvement over what we had seen before. It's a scale that really goes with the house. You've added, I think, the discussion we had about adding some connection of the brick, although not making the building out of brick. So I think the proportions are right. I think it's quite well done. Thank you very much. And the only thing I wanted to say for the record is the only reason that I would be in favor of Party Board is because it's an addition. It's not
Right.
the original. So if it were the original house for wood, and we might be having a different conversation, but we're not. So I just want to
Sure.
state that for the record. I don't have a problem with the Hardy Board for the addition. I think it seems awfully well done. Other comment?
No, I think it was a very well put together presentation and appreciated it.
Thank you.
Okay, if you're finished, we're gonna
Yes.
see if there's any, comments from anyone from the public would like to speak for or against this application? Or just comments generally? Okay, seeing no one rise, is there anything else you'd like to add, Ms. Croft? Okay, it's to the board. We have a staff recommendation of approval, and didn't hear any concerns on the application.
I move that the application for 455 East Tarpon Avenue be approved as submitted.
A motion by Ms. Page for approval as submitted. Is there a second?
I second.
I heard Ms. Milford first, so. All right, so their motion on the floor is to approve it as submitted. Motion by Ms. Page and seconded by Ms. Milford. Any further conversation or discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Ms. Milford,
Yes.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Terrapini.
Yes, the motion is approved 5-0 as submitted. Thank you very much. Our second application tonight is 18-160, 230 Hibiscus Street, replacement of windows and door on a contributing structure. Ms. McNeese?
Yes, this is a request to replace 9 existing wood windows with vinyl windows and to replace the front door. This was continued from your January 14, 2019 meeting, and 8 of the windows are on the outside of the structure. The 9th is between the main structure, and the shed addition. You requested additional information mainly on the condition of the windows, and you also requested that the applicant consider proposing a front door not constructed of steel material. The applicant has submitted a detailed report on the condition of the existing windows and a product sheet for a proposed wood door of essentially the same style as the proposed steel door. So with respect to the review criteria, item 2, again, the applicant has proposed replacement of all of the existing wood windows on the structure with the double hung sash 1/1 vinyl windows. These are proposed to match the style and color of the existing windows and size for size replacement. And the applicant is also proposing a wood door of the same size as the current door with is a solid door with an upper arched eyebrow window similar to the one you saw last month. The window and door replacements are consistent with the character of the building's architectural style, and they're also consistent with the architectural elements of the buildings in the surrounding area. Fenestration will not change. The applicant has proposed size for size replacement. The applicant has not proposed to disturb the surrounding trim and sills. So those would be remain the same. And the applicant has submitted extensive documentation of the advanced deterioration and a severely compromised function of the existing windows. So staff feels that this documentation shows that repairs would go beyond cosmetics and would have to, probably for most or all, would have to be a complete rebuild of some of these windows to make them fit the openings. The resultant style and character of the building will remain the same upon completion of the project. And the windows replicate the original windows in composition, design, and size. And the proposed door is an acceptable replacement design and of the same size as the current door. Again, all the replacements will retain their existing surrounds and will not detract from the building. So staff feels that the renovations are consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards and the city's design guidelines, and that the project will meet the Land Development Code and is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. Staff recommends approval of the application to replace 9 windows and 1 door, subject to the following conditions. The applicant is responsible for obtaining the required permits, and all of the existing trim, sills, and thresholds should be retained and not disturbed. I only added that because it wasn't really mentioned in the application, so I felt that it should be somewhere in the package. Public notice was sent, and there were no responses received to public notice. Are there any questions?
Any questions of staff? Is the applicant here? Would you like to come forward, please?
Hi, I'm Kelly Flannery of 230 Hibiscus Street. I'm just going to read off my paper. I wrote a bunch of stuff down. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you tonight about my application again. As you've stated already, I have applied for a new front door and 9 new windows for my house, vinyl windows. The current front door is extremely old. It has 12 little, rather large actual glass panels on it. The panels are extremely thin and would be very easy to break into. Last month, my application had a steel door with a half moon on top of it. I was able to find a very similar door. It's basically identical, only it's wood. But it's of the same design, but it's a little bit more expensive. And the longevity of it obviously is not quite as great as a steel door. I've chosen this door because I really want to work with you guys to keep the historic nature of the house. I'm a first-time homeowner, and this is my first house. I've actually purchased the house because I was looking for an old Florida-style house that was affordable and in the downtown area. I love the style of the size of the house. However, the windows are a serious problem. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold. So when I put my offer in for the house, I went back and forth with the previous owner a few times because I knew that the windows were going to be a concern. The seller refused to fix the windows because he knew of the expense and how long it takes and all of that. So I settled on the house back in October, but I haven't fully moved in to the house yet because of the windows. As I'm sure you can see from the pictures that I submitted and the summaries of the pictures that I sent out to you guys, there are many issues with the windows. In their current state, none of the windows open and function in their intended manner because they are screwed shut. All of the windows have pulley systems that are either non-functioning or strings are missing. The windows are ridden with termite damage. There's gaps between sashes and frames. There's gaps you can actually see light through the frame of the window. One window has a bullet hole in it. One leaks water when it rains. A few weeks ago, there was a cold front that came through, and it was very, very windy. And it sounded like, because of the rain and the wind, it sounded like someone was trying to shimmy up the windows because they were rattling so much. And sometimes they even rattle when like big trucks drive by. You can hear them just like shaking in their panes. The windows are so thin that you can hear full conversations from people across the street, people way down across the street. You can just hear things that are happening at the Greek buildings right around there. And so as for the safety of the windows, they're not safe in any way. If there was a fire or an emergency situation, I'd have to smash the glass to get out because they don't actually open in their current state. And so I'd have to try not to cut myself as I'm going out. There's so much damage to the windows that they really cannot be repaired. I respectfully request that you approve my application for safe new windows. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flannery. Any questions of Ms. Flannery?
No.
Okay. We'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak for or against this application? You would come on down to the podium and give your name and address.
Hello, just a short thing. I'm Loretta Flannery. I'm her mom, and I'm from 502 Windrush Bay over in Tarpon Springs. And I hope you had the opportunity to look at the pictures that she provided, because just her saying what the damage is to them doesn't really give it justice. I mean, when you look at those pictures, you think, yeah, they're really, really bad. And so I don't know if any of you have any kids, but if you did, you wouldn't want them living in a house like this. You wouldn't be I'm not comfortable with her living there. She hasn't really fully moved in yet because she just doesn't feel safe there at this time. So I just would appreciate that you would give Kelly's request your approval, and that so she can move in and feel safe and start enjoying her new home, her first time home. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flannery. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing no one rise to the board. Well, I'll start. I think you made a big improvement on the door, and the best way to make sure that the door stays there and stays in place and it is safe is to paint it. It's pretty simple. That's all you really have to do is paint it and keep it in good working order, and it'll work fine for years and years and years to come. And I think you'll be happy with it. And I think the style is nice. I have some hesitation about the wholesale replacement of the windows. So I'm just one board member. I've looked at it. I, like some of the other board members, have experience in renovating, hands-on renovating in a couple different houses and some commercial buildings. I see that there is deterioration, but I see that all that it can be repaired. I'm not sure that I'm seeing 50%, but that's just my opinion. I'll let the board jump in. I mean, a lot of the work that I saw, or the pictures that I saw, is they need to be taken out, scraped, painted, the ropes put back in, the pulleys put back in, and there are companies that actually specialize in doing that, so it's not an impossibility. Like I said, I kind of looked at it. I'm interested to see what the rest of the board thinks. If it's 50, what our standard is and the guidelines are. First, that you repair. Repair is the number one recommendation. Then it says if 50% or more of the windows are deteriorated or missing, then the wholesale replacement of windows is permitted, provided they match the key design elements. I don't think we have any question about that. They're going in the same opening. They are 1/1. I mean, all that is not an issue. But I'm just curious what the rest of the board is thinking about.
When I looked over it, I kept looking to see if there was anyone that had expertise in historical restoration, and I didn't see anything in the package that would tell me that there's somebody that could tell me that the windows absolutely have to be replaced, because we've seen other windows like this that actually look worse than the pictures here, and I looked through every one of the pictures, and I went to the house too, so I've looked at all of it, and I wondered whether or not you could possibly get an expert in historical restoration to say how much percentage of that damage can it be repaired? Can it be replaced? Does it need to be? Because I'm not an expert with the windows and doors, especially with the historical things. And I know that as a homeowner, that looks really bad if you want to just get new windows. But once we destroy a historical building or window or doors or anything, it's gone forever. So I would like to see something from someone who has that expertise to say whether or not this meets that 50% or more.
Well,
Clarification, I think it's your standard, and Ms. Terrapini can correct me because I don't have the book in front of me, but that it's that 50% of the windows are deteriorated.
But to what degree? Because
And that is not within your guidelines. It just says are deteriorated. So that's something that the board is going to have to consider. But I don't necessarily. I just wanted to clarify that the standard, the guideline, is that it's 50% of the windows, not 50% of the window is deteriorated. It's 50% of the windows in the home have deterioration.
Past, I think that's exactly right. We looked at, okay, if there's, like in this case, there's 9 windows, are 5 or more that, well, it'd be 4.5 technically. So are 5 or more of them so deteriorated that they can't be repaired? That's kind of where we've gone.
And how would I know that without somebody with the expertise telling me they can't be? Because as a homeowner, you would say.
And I understand that, but you need, and that's something that the evidence that is presented here tonight, they are not required to bring in an expert to tell you that. And I will tell you from the review of what y'all asked for at the last meeting was just pictures. You didn't ask for them to go out and get an expert opinion.
I wasn't here at the last meeting.
And I understand that.
I think what we asked her for
But-
was documentation of what is the status of the windows, however
Right.
she decided.
And I do want to address that too, because if y'all remember at the last meeting, I read in your rules of procedure and your guidelines, if you are going to sit in judgment and make a voting decision at this meeting, you would have had to go back and review the tape from that meeting, because now you're not getting all of the evidence that is presented in order to make the decision. So you, of course, can sit with discussion, but I think you're going to have to refrain from voting.
Okay, I'll
On this
recuse
application.
myself from that.
Right, but to that point, this board had only asked for photographs, and so you need to use whatever the evidence that's presented to make that determination. I just wanted to simply clarify what the
Okay.
guideline was.
Okay.
I was simply going to say that all we asked Kelly to bring from the last meeting was photographs, and that, thank you, because this is wonderful. This does give us a better picture of, what you have to deal with.
And in the past, we have had photographs presented. Sometimes it's been a photograph and a report. You'll remember on Old City Hall, we had
Right.
photographs and then an architect's evaluation of those windows. But I will say, honestly, to our concern about that building was the importance and the status of that particular building. So this is, while it's an important house and a contributing house, it's a little different from public building that was City Hall. So we attached a whole lot more historic importance and required a higher level of analysis, and the city, as the owner, provided that. So I'm not dissatisfied with the photos presented. I'm just saying that I'm not convinced that it's 50%.
And I will recuse myself because I did not watch that video, so I will recuse myself from the vote on this.
But you can, of course, participate in the discussion, though.
Okay.
I live in a house with similar windows, and
Will you
my
please move
windows-
forward?
I live in a house with similar windows. It's not in the historic district, but it has similar window types, makes the noise. And I have had people come and work on the windows to restore certain ones that were in bad shape. Again, I don't know the percentage that I don't have a feel for the percentage that we're talking about in this overall to do a full-scale replacement of all the windows.
I've looked at the pictures, and I've lived in a house with windows like that, and the obvious damage to so many of the windows, whether it's 40, 50, 60%, it looks like it involves all of the windows. And the termite evidence on the windowsills shows that whatever is there has got to be rotted on the inside. So I don't see how that can be repaired because there's so much termite evidence.
Oh, and
All that pepper on the windowsill is termite evidence.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, in the case of, I'm just speaking from my own personal experience. In the case of my home, the chunks, those damaged pieces of wood are removed and replaced with.
I think if,
It's time consuming. It's expensive.
yes,
But
and if one or two windows were involved in a particular shady corner of the house, I would see where those should be repaired. But
Right.
this seems to be a general overall problem of the house.
I just want to remind the board that the cost is really not an issue here. That's not one of our criteria to discuss it. So I just want to, we're not comparing cost of new windows versus repairing windows. That's really not relevant to our conversation. But again, what's relevant is whether or not the board thinks there are 50% of the windows, so of the 9, are there 5 of them that are deteriorated or missing? Clearly, there's none missing. So that's the standard that we are looking at, that in our previous decisions that we've made, on windows.
So from my perspective, the pictures show there is damage to some extent in all the windows, so that seems to me to exceed 50%. The biggest concerns to me would be twofold. One, the gaps. I mean, I think that's very problematic, and the termite damage. Similarly, my husband and I redid a house before it was in the historic district and did replace the windows because of this kind of damage. Wasn't an issue from a historic perspective because it was a historic house put in the historic district, but we just did not feel that they were repairable with, and they had similar gaps and extensive.
More discussion? Ready for a motion? I'll entertain a motion. So with Ms. Milford recused herself, there's 4 members voting. Can she make the motion or no? No.
No.
Okay.
Think about that.
Just wanna
No,
clarify.
she cannot make the motion.
Or a second, okay, so,
Well, I'll motion that the application for 230 Hibiscus Street as presented be accepted as read.
Ms. Cornell has moved that we approve the application as submitted. Is there a second?
I'll-
Seconded by Mrs. Johnson. Any further conversation?
Let me clarify, the door is wood, correct?
Oh, yes, so we wanted to, so the motion, is your motion,
To
for the
approve it.
door and the replace the windows and
And the
replace the
door.
door as submitted?
As
Okay,
read, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
So everyone's clear on the motion?
Yes.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Ms. Terrapini.
No. Motion passes 3-1, and so you're approved. Just be sure, you need to be sure you get a building permit, be sure your contractor gets a building permit. It's the most important part. Thank you so much. Okay, if y'all will indulge me, I'd like to take the 123 Reed Street first, because I think we can dispose of that fairly quickly, and then we'll have time to discuss your application, because there's a lot in the last case. So is the applicant here for application 1902 123 Reed Street? Okay. Ms. McNeese? This is 1902 123 Reed Street to re-roof a contributing structure. So we'll take that one out of order, please.
Okay, this is a proposal to completely replace the existing combination of roof materials with a composition shingle roof at 123 Reed Street, a contributing structure. This is a, basically it's a shingle style residence. So it's got metal shingles covering the second floor, which is the cross-gabled roof. And then it's got composition shingles on the first floor, which is the hip roof part. And the applicant wishes to replace the entire roof with composition shingles. With respect to the review criteria, item 4, the structure, again, is a shingle-style residence. And the site file form notes gingerbread and brackets ornamentation on this roof, and those features will not be disturbed. The shapes of the roof will not change, and the guideline in the guideline, shingle style isn't specifically called out, but the roofing form has with the multiple planes somewhat borrows from Queen Anne style, so I kind of use that. Composition shingle material is acceptable for that type of roof. And the guidelines do prohibit mixing of different materials, which is the current condition of the structure right now. And all of the other structures on this block of Reed Street do have composition shingles. Again, the distinguishing architectural features associated with the roof itself will not be disturbed. And the roof form is also preserved. And so the proposed replacement roof does meet the Secretary of Interior standards and the city's guidelines. It would conform to the Land Development Code. A roof permit would be needed. And it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Staff recommends approval of this application to replace the existing combination of roofing materials with composition shingles on the primary contributing structure of the property. The applicant is responsible for obtaining all permits, and this was properly publicly noticed, and there were no responses received to the notice. Are there any questions?
Questions of Ms. McNeese?
No.
Would the applicant like to come forward, please?
Hello, I'm Alex Beckel of 123 Reed Street. I think Mrs. McNeese pretty much covered everything that I was going to say. I think maybe the most important thing is that all the other structures which are contributing on the street all have, you know, a composite roof similar. And the fact that there's two different materials being used, we're just kind of coming into compliance by, you know, going with a single material on both floors. In my opinion, it's always looked really bad this way, and it's, you know, it's gonna make the house look really nice. I did bring a sample with me.
Sure.
Do you want me to bring it?
You can come up front, let everybody take a peek at it. The dark one at the.
It's all.
Oh, okay.
Kind of mimics like a cedar shake roof, which is what, as far as we know from the family, that it was originally a cedar shake roof.
Okay. Why don't you let them look at it, and then if you want to add anything else, you can go back to the podium.
Nice.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything else, Mr. Beckel?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to this case? Okay, seeing no one rise, any questions for Mr. Beckel? Thank you, Mr. Beckel.
Thank you.
The board? Ready for a motion? Okay.
I move that the application for 123 Reed Street be approved as submitted.
Motion on the floor for approval as submitted by Ms. Page. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Johnson. Any further conversation or discussion about this item?
No.
Okay, well, I'd just like to let the record reflect that Mr. Beckel brought a sample of the shingle that he's using and showed it to us during the meeting. Okay, are we ready for a vote?
Yes.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Ms. Milford,
Yes.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Terrapini.
Yes, motion is approved 5-0. Like I said earlier, please be sure and get a building permit. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, thank you for your patience. I thought it might be useful to go ahead and finish that one case. We're now on our last case, and I know it's a lot going on this application, and we're excited to see the changes and the improvements. So let's talk about application 18-166 for 310 East Tarpon Avenue, exterior renovations to a contributing structure. This was a continued case. Ms. McNeese?
Okay, and with the longest application comes the longest staff report, and I'm going to just hit the highlights. There's a lot of detail in here. So this is a certificate of approval basically for exterior renovations to an existing contributing property at 310 East Tarpon Avenue. And this is to make improvements that will allow an upgrade of the current restaurant use, to expand the outdoor customer seating and to provide that improved service circulation and customer circulation as well. And the applicant has submitted an extensive summary narrative and plan views and architectural renderings for this. It basically, I'm going to hit the highlights of what this includes. On the octagonal bay tower on the north side of the north side of the property at the porch level is proposed to replace portions of the 3 existing walls to accommodate a new entrance door and 2 new windows. We're removing 1 porch column and installing new steps up to the front porch, along with a brick paver walkway that leads to the street. We're replacing railing and roof or ceiling beam on the front porch to be more appropriate to the architectural style. On the west side of the building, we're removing the double solid doors that are there and the single window. All of those are not original, and replacing those with 3 single wide doors, 2 windows, and a service window. And also on the west side, we are installing a U-shaped bar under the existing porch roof extension, replacing, again, guardrails along the deck and access ramp, and I can't remember if I mentioned on the front porch with a simpler picket-style type rail, removing the concrete walkway in the front and the corresponding steps that are there now in the front. Those are on like the northwest corner of the front porch, and installing a new ramp with handrails in that area. Installing a new front patio area with several elements, including brick piers and ornamental metal fencing sections, and installing brick piers, metal gate, and ornamental fencing at the front entrance to the property. The narrative does include additional detail I didn't list here that, if they came in alone, would be staff approval, but those are all part of this. So where they talk about repairing siding where they need to, the lighting, those things are all included in this. With respect to the review, again, the overall objective is to complete a remodeling of the property to enhance its continued service as a commercial restaurant, but also this remodel enhances, to me, aims to enhance the architectural experience of this building, both for the patrons and from the street, for the public. Some of the highlights of that: the staircase is centered relative to that octagonal bay tower, which is a feature that the site file mentions. It's a feature that the form calls out. That provides a symmetry, promotes a line of view that emphasizes that notable feature of the home. It's also consistent with centered stairways on two of the adjacent contributing structures to the east. The same with the front door and windows. This street has contributing structures that have those front porch doors and windows, and this proposal also provides a consistency there. As far as the replacement railing and balusters, the applicant is proposing to remove those tall spindle-type balusters and replace it with a picket-type feature, which seems to emphasize the attractive architecture of this building. The applicant does propose a ramp for disabled access at the front. There is an extensive explanation of that in the narrative, and I'm sure the applicant will expand on that. The design guidelines prohibit the placement of modern equipment on the front building facade. The guidelines further talk about disabled access with respect to visual compatibility and the ability to remove such an item in the future. Staff feels that the item could probably pretty much be easily removed without disturbing the architecture later, but did not see evidence sufficient to overcome the visual compatibility standard. So that's where we are on that. On the west side of the building, and of course the existing handicap ramp that is on the west side of the building will remain. They propose to leave that. There's parking behind the building, and that's how that access is provided to the parking. That west side of the building faces a vacant lot. That lot is up for sale. It's reasonable to assume that that building would not be as visible at some time in the future. So that might be something you would want to keep in mind. But the applicant's kind of carrying that storefront theme or opening kind of theme to the west side of the building. Again, using windows to match, trying to put windows in the front and on the west side that will match the original windows, whereas the current window on the west side does not match those windows, the current non-original window on the west side. The railings, the simple picket railings would be carried over to that west side as well. With respect to item 2, all that architectural detail, really I would be repeating myself if I went through most of that. Just to add that the new walkway and front yard patio are proposed to be of the running bond brick. We do have a brick street nearby, and we do have brick elements in the city sidewalks right in front of the building and along Tarpon Avenue. So those elements seem to be compatible with that surrounding area, and the applicant has also provided photographic examples of the use of all these treatments, the brick piers, the concrete benches, iron fence elements in the historic district. With respect to item 3, the project is located in the Tarpon Avenue Main Street, that's the T5B Transect District of the city's special area plan. And the proposal is consistent with the district guidelines, and of course compliance with the standards will be required with respect to landscaping. Staff feels that this proposal is consistent with that transect, and actually is in the spirit of the vision for that transect by opening this front to the street, Tarpon Avenue, creating more of a relationship between the building and the street. So with respect to item 5, the size and mass of the building itself will not be changed. The proposal does ensure preservation of the building form and continues or increases the focus on its prominent features, such as the front wraparound porch and the bay tower. With respect to item 7, again, some of the detail is outlined in the applicant's narrative, but the applicant proposes to try to bring the detail of the structure more in line with the architectural style as they outline in her application, and this proposal is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards and the city's guidelines. And with respect to everything except staff could not come to the conclusion that it's consistent with the guidelines with respect to the front ramp. Would like the board to consider the evidence that's given tonight on that item. And the applicant is expected to be able to meet the city's land development code. This application is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. So staff recommends approval of the application to renovate the exterior of an existing contributing structure, including installation of new doors and windows, replacement of guardrails, removal and renovation of column and ceiling beam porch elements, installation of new steps, removal of existing steps, installation of new building opening and service bar, and installation of new walkways, patio, brick piers, and iron fencing, all as described herein, which would include all those details described. Subject to the condition of removing the ramp proposed at the front of the building, and the applicant is responsible for obtaining required permits. This application was properly noticed, and there were no responses received to the notices. Are there any questions?
I have one question, Ms. McNeese. I just want to make sure I understand. And so when they make an opening for the new window or the new doors that they're putting in, if there's a need to repair the existing wood siding, they would repair that with wood.
That is correct.
Other questions?
You said
My question was, they're putting in new windows and doors at several locations.
Mm-hmm.
So my question was, if they need to, when they do cut that new opening, if they have to repair the wood around it, would they repair it with wood, since the house is wood, not hardy board? And the answer was yes, it will be repaired with wood. Or if they need to replace a board that was rotted around that new window or door surround, they would do that with wood to match the existing site.
And that is outlined on page 2 of the applicant's narrative.
Thank you. I just wanted to quadruple check that. Any other questions for the staff before we hear from the applicant?
I actually have a question about, well, since we didn't hear this entire application on January 14th, would Ms. Milford be able to vote today?
Yes, because there was no evidence that was given at the last meeting, because it ended up being that what was being requested was so far from what was noticed that it's completely fine.
Okay. Any other questions of the staff before we hear from the applicant? Would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening. Again, Ed Hoffman, Hoffman Architects, 29 West Orange Street, Tarpon Springs. Ms. Milford, I'll try extra hard to help you out. Just remind me if I get off track. This house, I think everyone is very, very familiar with. Anybody living in Tarpon Springs or have traveled Tarpon Avenue. It was reworked not too terribly long ago, and some of the translations, I think, of what happened or was requested in this meeting, the way they were translated to the building may not necessarily have been what you were expecting. We're trying to resolve some of those things and bring the building back into a stronger, richer character. One of the biggest issues as we look at this building, by the way, Bob Ray is here helped put a lot of this together here from our office, and Doug Clark is also here, the owner of the facility. So, and he can talk at length about his vision of the menu and all the wonderful things that are going to happen, but maybe that's not in your purview.
Not
So-
since we all probably haven't had dinner yet. So
Right,
no.
right. If you had dinner there, then you might have a different view, but it's going to be fabulous. But it's really his theme kind of comes out from his background in New Orleans with, and Doug, correct me if I screw this up, okay? But in New Orleans and looking at the building, right now has this wonderful cooker that is part of the barbecue restaurant that's already there. So it works easily around that to do more of a Cajun style, the New Orleans or Creole type of a smokehouse. And so using that as a little bit of a theme, also considering that in New Orleans, pretty much from what I understand, every corner, even in the residential districts, can become a restaurant facility. So a lot of mom and pop are using those corner old houses, historic houses for this. So this is a little bit in keeping with that as well. So I think as we look at that building, there are some things that are, of course, very obvious to us, which, the easy one is the color. But, the dream of being a Key West style barbecue place may have not worked out as well as it could have or should have, but I think I had a couple other names that might be more appropriate for it, could have worked out better. But nonetheless, as we look at this building, some of the biggest problems and that idea of trying to engage, as Mrs. McNeese said earlier, trying to engage the street with the building and with what's going on there. Right now, the building, as you see it, is very almost inapproachable. It is not asking, it's not an invitation at all to come into the building. So we look at some of the things that they had added on, these spindle handrails, guardrails with the drink rail right up next to it. Between that, bringing the height up and becoming quite a barrier to the street. Then there's also the panel here down low that, again, there's very, very little opening, very little that is inviting for you. The turret in the middle is quite, one of the strongest architectural features. And that, my first concern was, gosh, the stair, we certainly wouldn't want to disturb a wonderful stair that is behind that. But as you go inside and you find that stairwell, the stair that's there is very, very marginal in terms, with no historic value except that, yes, it was a stair. But it has been redone, reworked, or rebuilt in a way that's a very, very sloppy thing. So I don't have a real, there's no sadness at all about relocating that stair. But so again, the idea for us is to create a new invitation off of Tarpon Avenue into the building. And so we're going to show you how we'd like to do that. As we look at the existing building, of course, this is a drink rail. There's already a deck there. It has a kind of a funky awning, contemporary awning hanging over top here. The entrance from the street side is way over on the side with some steps up here. The handicap access is from the rear. Let's see, what we're going to be talking about is reworking the front here, reworking the porch, the feel of the porch, and then working again on the west side. This, by the way, is Tarpon Avenue. So as we look at the plan, some of the things that we're trying to do, again, that trying to make the building more friendly, is to bring from Tarpon Avenue, we have a series of a little bit of a fence, some brick pillars here, and then a brick walkway, creating steps at the entry, at the front door, which is where you would expect them. Of the hexagonal thing here, we're creating a new entrance, a front door here, and creating windows. So the building becomes a little more transparent. I don't know how many of y'all have been there, but right now that as you approach the building, the doors are solid. They've been at it over the years, and so there's no transparency to the building, hardly at all. It'd make a good speakeasy or something, but it's not a friendly type of a facility. It's not very attractive in that way. So we're trying to create a new entry here, and on center, using that centerpiece as the front door for the facility, hostess station, and that kind of thing that you probably don't care a lot about. But on the exterior, we're trying to bring this and make it more of a ceremonial entrance. We will also be working with right now there's a porch here on the side, an existing porch with a little, it's totally roofed with a couple of columns, so we'll be trying to make that the outside kind of a bar, a little bit of an indoor-outdoor bar. So we'll also be translating how we work on that west elevation. We're getting rid of the entrance over here, and again, trying to create it just here. While we're on this plan, is to mention our feeling about the handicap ramp, which is here. We anticipate this patio area, which has seating and probably umbrellas in the summer. Probably take them down in the winter when it's cold. And then having a possibly water, maybe a feature here in the center. We're trying to make this to be an appropriate place for having dinner and drinks as well, outdoor patio or waiting or whatever. So also on First Friday events, again trying to reactivate the street downtown, that people would come in off the street and be able to use a facility out here in the patio without necessarily going inside. Part of his problem is his success is going to be a problem too. He's going to have a lot of people waiting. So I feel comfortable and confident of that. But with regard to that, bringing the entrance, the handicap, of course we have the steps here, but handicap entrance on on the street side of the building we feel is very important. For a couple of reasons. The primary reason is that the people that are being served on this side of the building, the front side, the street side, the entry side, we should respect them with a handicap access. Currently, we have the access around the back side, and yes, there might be a handicap, parking back there, but it doesn't address, all the people that we're anticipating coming off the street here. So we feel that having an access point on the front side of the building is important. I'll show you in a moment how we tend to play that down, so it's not a feature at all. But we want you to bring to us, is in terms of dignity, that when somebody arrives at the front of the building, they should be invited to go up the ramp into the building in a way that is not asking them to be a second-class citizen, go around the back or around the side. And in fact, the idea of using this ramp for people out here that need to use the restroom, asking them to go out here down the block, over past the next lot, down the street, back up and around, is totally unacceptable. So that's why it is in this location. Again, we could probably get it into the side over here, but when people come up to the front walk, we would like for them to be invited to continue up. whether they're in a wheelchair or they just have a minor disability that going up steps is hard to navigate. So that's the reason for that. I might come back to this slide, but again, as we kind of look at what's very, very enclosed and very totally closed off, you don't know what's going on in there at all. So as we try to open that up with the front door, with the steps, removing this front column, it becomes much more inviting, brings some windows in there that match some of the existing windows on the building. As you can see here, we'll be removing this center column. It's problematic to have a split where you don't know one side from the other, so we're bringing you through the center. The other thing we're doing is getting rid of the spindles and the bar rail there. We're also getting rid of some of what I would consider the Home Depot Victorian things that were added, with these little elements tacked on that somebody thought was cute somewhere along the way. I do not believe they're original to that building. We're looking at more of a handrail like this. This is actually our office. This is 1889 building. A fairly low but very simple farmhouse kind of a rail. By the way, we are also looking at that because our elevation, we're not required to have actually a guardrail along this because we're less than 30 inches off grade. We're just needing to do something that's safe. However, we will be bringing another rail, and I'll show you that in a moment, up to the tabletop height. We'll no longer have a drink rail there. It'll be for tables. So again, trying to open it up. This is what I was mentioning about the upper rail matching the lower rail here, and then a higher rail matching the table, a standard 30-inch table height. As we get most of what we're doing again is the picket style, but where we get to the ramp, we can just use it, leave it open, because again, we don't have the big legal 30-inch, more than a 30-inch drop, so we can just use that in a very simple way and very minor. It could be very unobtrusive at the handicap ramp. Again, spindles that we're going to get rid of here and trade for something more simple. Again, letting these guys go for what's simple. In your book, you've probably already seen we have all of these little things designating what we're doing, trying to be in the guidelines of historic guidelines of what should be appropriate. I don't think I'll go through all of those because I know I'm standing here between you and maybe dinner. But on the front door or the doors to the facility, this is kind of what we're looking at as a full light. What we want to do is find a historic door. We don't think we have to, because of the appropriateness of the building, we don't have to do the impact and door and all that kind of, so we don't have to do a steel or fiberglass door. So that's our intention, to do something, find a really wonderful antique door, full light door to use as a front door. The side doors over on the west next to the bar and all can be more typical like this. Again, a full light door. And so this is, again, the windows, this view is this view. And so again, trying to use a full light door here so that, again, we get more transparency, which also makes it safer so that you can, if somebody's coming through, you can see that. And so you get fewer clashes.
Before you leave that slide, Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Will the new window be a wood window?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. We don't anticipate, by the way, you're mentioning earlier about the siding. We don't anticipate any hardy board on this project at all. This is a restoration of an existing building. And so, and we're actually, there's very little new other than repairs. So when we put the new window in, or whatever trim or whatever is necessary will be wood to match the original building. again, the window that's there, that's what's typical, and that's what we'll be using again. This is just a little bit more of a close-up view of the bar area and how we're doing outdoor seating. Out here, as opposed to using that awning kind of thing that's up there now, the big sails, we're probably, again, in the summer, we would just be using typical umbrella type of things with some color to make it attractive.
Well, while you're
Yes,
on that slide,
sure.
the inside portion of the proposed handicap ramp, would that be the same kind of rail as on the other side of the house? You showed the open rail.
This where it's along here, where's in front of this would just be an open rail. Again, because it's a short fall.
Side.
On the street side would be open.
How about the inside one?
And inside here, we would probably use the typical railing that we're using everywhere else, so it's consistent, as if the handicap rail's not there.
Right.
If that makes sense. Again, we consider this long and hard because, the first instinct is gosh, we really like to have a lot more green right here. But the handicap is an issue. I mean, it's something we need to deal with and treat people with respect. And also in terms of service, for wait staff and all to be able to go down carry a tray of drinks or whatever down the ramp is so much easier than going down the steps. So, again, this is existing, so we're trying to, just use that and not create anything really new there. It's just the siding that would probably be underneath the bar will match the house. Again, the windows will match the existing. I think right now, let's see. Yeah, right now there's an existing window here. We'll end up reworking that, and it'll become this, because this is one that we're removing, and it'll become a window that looks more like that, something a little more elegant. On this side, again, the handrail, we're changing the design so it's not this real high drink rail with the long, tall, skinny spindles. This is, again, the west side of the building.
Mr. Hoffman, about
Yes.
how far off the property line is that?
It's right up against it,
It is.
very, very close.
No room for any landscape or anything to go along
Not currently. It's I wish we had control of that right now. However, I'm sure to be able to plant some things in the interim, I'm sure we could probably get some approval from the owner to let us do some landscaping there, which would add to the building a great deal. Again, right now we have this, the high spindles, and I don't know what we're looking at, but we want to take it from that, with those sails I was mentioning, take it from that and go to this. Something that would be more inviting, have a little gate, a little bit of wrought iron types of things, the brick, the seating, a little bit of a fountain here. We're also looking at a light post here with maybe some very small, some signage here. We'll have to, of course, certainly work with the sign ordinance. And a little bit of awning up here to kind of tie it all together. So I think that gives you a little sense of what we're trying to do. Again, this is a ramp over at the Safford House. There aren't any pickets and all. It was pretty simply done. This is, actually this is on site, and we wanted to use more of this kind of a thing for the patio area, kind of the red brick kind of a thing. This is, again, kind of the gas light kind of thing, maybe the signage out there on the street so that people can find it. We also So now you see the pillars, the way the pillars work with the little gate at the entry here. And some more landscaping, trying to make this thing very inviting and presentable. Again, a little, something you see here in town over on Spring Bayou. And this is maybe the light fixture, that we're trying to use on that post out front, decorative fixture. And just kind of the relationship of the seating and the brick and the little piers. So, and then we're, different studies on what can happen in that center space. So with that, hopefully I haven't told you too much.
Thank you very much. Any
So we're
questions
available
Mr.
for questions.
Hoffman? We'll get back to you. Let's see if there's anybody from the public
Okay.
that would like to speak. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this application? See no one rise. I want to talk a minute about the ramp.
Okay.
I think you're between a rock and a hard place. I just don't know where else you would put it. You absolutely have to meet ADA. We know that. You cannot, like you said, you cannot allow the accessibility to be a rear entrance or, just a negative, entry to the property. And I think you've got it about as understated as you can get it and still comply. You obviously want
Right.
to comply. What I think is going to help is that you've got, in this picture, the perspective drawing, it appears that the rail on the street side, as Ms. Johnson was saying, the street side for the handicap ramp and the rail on the house, on the front of the house, or the deck of the house, appears to be this similar style, similar spacing, and I think if that's correct, I think that will kind of ameliorate, your eye will kind of blend and not see that,
Right.
It's not going to scream handicap ramp.
Right. Right. Most handicap entrances, particularly afterthoughts, are so afterthought in appearance that they become disgusting. And so hopefully we're doing something that's going to be sensitive to the original structure.
Well, and you've got it, it's not right on the front of, it's not at the front entrance, but it's not on the front facade itself, the center part. It's a little to the side, but it's still prominent. It's still easy for people to use. I think it's about as good a solution as you're going to get. So, that's my opinion.
No, I agree wholeheartedly, and as a person who will use that ramp,
I will before long.
And I think the rest of the application is, it's quite well done. I think you guys did a great job with this. Appreciate that you came back this month, as I think it kind of all came together. We really understood what you were asking. Clearly, the staff understood. You could see that in their staff report, and I think it's a good solution to the building. And it is definitely going to open that building up and make people want to come in. As right now, you kind of go, is it even open? You're not really sure.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's a mystery place.
But architecturally, I think you're doing great things, and glad to hear that it's all wood. And the only other suggestion I have is I hope you're going to take that horrible panel sign off the second floor.
Yes. You may have seen that in the renderings. That is no longer there.
That's not in the photo. I knew it's.
and the pig.
The pig? Well, the pig might wander off. I don't know.
Other comments or questions for Mr. Hoffman?
Hope they change the color.
Well, we don't review color, but obviously, I think
That
pink is.
You might see a shift in that.
That's not an area of review.
Yeah, I
but-
know.
In the past, we have reviewed signage. When
When it comes, when they have to
so-
do a new sign, it'll come back to the board.
That's what I was wondering.
We will, right? Is that correct, Ms.
Because we
That's
have-
correct.
Okay, because one of the items here, we're talking about the piers and the fire pit area, possible fountain or fire pit feature. There was a light post mentioned in the drawing. So will those all be, those ornamentations come before us or no?
Well, I would say the patio area, all the features described in the application go with that patio, with this current application. I'm assuming that the sign will be new. You won't be reusing, yeah.
Right, no, the sign will
That
come
will
off
come
the
back
building.
before you. Lighting is not really mentioned on your list, but we can just say if you want to, the sign and the light, I'm assuming, would be together and would come back as an item.
Yeah, we
Now,
had a
the
rendering
lighting
of,
on the building would be with this package. That would be a staff, basically approval. But with this package, the lighting on the building that they mentioned, that would
I
be
feel
part
like
of the.
it's going to be appropriate, but I do know that in the past, there have been other businesses that have put signage up and have come before us, and we've said, well, it's not consistent, or, so that would be one of my concerns.
Right, and so since we don't see a sign in this package, that would come back at whatever point when they're.
the sign is, the sign is in one of those, well, it's in a rendering, and then it's also in an elevation.
Where it was?
It's that section elevation where you see the parked car in the street. It shows you the light fixture with the sign hanging off of it.
Oh, it does.
It has that oval shape. It's just that, it'll be a wood carved kind of a sign. We'd like to put some lighting on it. But if we, deviate from that, we would certainly expect to come back. But in general, that's what we'll be doing.
Hi, Doug Clark. The lighting, the specific,
Speak into the microphone, please,
the
Mr. Clark.
specific lighting,
That's a light.
the specific lighting that is pictured, those are relevant to the actual project based off, that one says French Series. So downtown New Orleans from the 9th Ward all the way up to Magazine Street and Uptown, they have specific features of those lights. They're called bevel lights. So on every street, Magazine Street, Bourbon Street, those specific lights are up and down the block. So it's affiliated with the building and what we're trying to accomplish with this project. That's where those lights come from. So the bevel lights are from New Orleans themselves.
So there's one in this drawing. Well, how many do you anticipate? Just one?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So now I'm confused. Are we saying that the signs are coming back or are not?
The sign definitely has to come back because you need the copy and the dimensions and all that.
The sign that's the one, like in this picture that says
Any-
Smokehouse, that is coming back to be
Yeah,
reviewed.
any new sign
Okay.
has to come back.
But not the lighting
Okay.
or both?
The lighting could be approved here because it's not on the list.
Signage.
Almost, yeah, it's not even on the review list.
I read that
So-
the lighting was getting approved because it's shown. on
Right.
plans.
It's just like, the wood to replace, it's one of those items that's in the application
Okay.
and could be approved.
So is everyone okay with the lighting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the lighting's, we're all fine with the lighting, but the signage is gonna come back with the real specific drawing of showing the size, showing the dimensions,
Right.
what it's made out of, showing it's conforming with the
font.
sign code.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. Okay. Well, I'm just thrilled that the sign on the plastered on the second floor is coming down. Okay, any further, would you all make any other comments, Mr. Hoffman or Mr. Clark?
The only comment I want to make is I appreciate the boys upstairs, Mike and Mark, for helping to get this set up because this is a real hard presentation to do on boards.
Yes.
We brought the boards just in case we had a crash and burn here, but this I think works.
Much better in the PowerPoint. Thank you for bringing
Yeah,
that. We
okay.
appreciate it.
I want to thank them for their help.
If we couldn't do it without our IT folks. Okay, so there's no one to speak from the audience. Anything else from the applicants? We're ready for the board, for conversation, for motion, for discussion. Entertain a motion. If y'all are ready.
And I'm gonna ask if y'all are gonna make a motion, to be super specific, since there was a lot included in the package that doesn't necessarily either need to be approved by this board or like the sign we've discussed. So the staff, under staff recommendations, staff recommends approval, there's a pretty good detailed list. So if you wanna make a motion for whatever as staff has recommended, that'll be sufficient. And you may wish to include lighting in that as well.
Okay, I'll give it a try. I recommend approval of CA-18-166, 310 East Tarpon Avenue, to renovate the exterior of the existing contributing structure, including installation of new doors and windows, replacement of guardrails, removal and renovation of column and ceiling beam, porch elements, installation of new steps, removal of existing steps, installation of new building opening and service bar, and installation of new walkways, patio, brick piers, and iron fencing as described in the package that we were presented today, including the lighting and also including the ramp.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for approval with, following the staff recommendation. There, second for the motion.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Milford. Okay, any further conversation or discussion?
Just one clarification, staff did not recommend approval of what Adam.
Right.
You're talking about the handicap
The
ramp.
handicap.
Okay, that's a good clarification, so that everyone's clear that this does include the handicapped ramp as shown,
The new one, yes.
the new one on the front north side of the building. Further discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Cornell,
Yes.
Ms. Milford,
Yes.
Ms. Page,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Terrapini.
Yes, motion's approved 5-0. Congratulations. We look forward to seeing this get going. Thank you. We have just one short item, and I know it's late, so I'll be really quick, and maybe we can talk about it again next month. I think Pat put in the, well, actually, we have two items. Pat had an item too. I see the Department of State letter about our CLG. Is there anything else you wanted to say about that, Pat?
No, just to thank the board. It's your perseverance. You're coming to every meeting. You're reviewing. That's what makes Tarpon Springs have our own local program and be able to kind of be master of our destiny with respect to this stuff. So I really appreciate your just continued ongoing efforts. Really do count. The state really recognizes that, and thank you.
Thank you.
And I do have one other item under staff.
Okay.
Just to reiterate, you did receive an email. This would be the filing of an appeal on your decision to deny a garage demolition at 58 Reed Street. That was application 1893. That decision was rendered at the January 14th meeting, and that is going to be scheduled for the February 26th Board of Commissioners meeting.
I had one question about that. Who will represent the board's position? People have the board, if the Board of Commissioners has questions about our decision and the basis for our decision, who will present that? Would that be you and Ms. Erweiler?
Staff will be presenting it based on, because the appeal to the Board of Commissioners is completely, it's not necessarily based on what was, and this sounds weird, but it's not necessarily based what was found here. It's not, they're not bound to the same criteria that you are in the appeal. It's just how it's written in the code. So there isn't going to be a representative from this board to state the position, but any questions can be asked. They'll be provided with the packet, the minutes, and everything, and any questions can be answered by staff.
Okay.
And of course, I will make sure that the city attorney is briefed on what occurred at that meeting, so he might be able to advise on some things.
Any other questions about
No.
this? I just brought this before us, and it was the last page in your packet. You remember the garage, and I can't remember the name of the street. It's not Shattuck. I want to say it's over
On Bay Street.
Bay Street. Yes, thank you. It came before the board. The applicant requested to build the new garage. It was approved, and you'll remember that we had quite a few residents, nearby residents, neighbors come to several meetings since then that were concerned about it. And it kind of hit me the other day, a month or so when I was reading the code, because this board approved it, those residents could not appeal that decision. You can only appeal, like in the case where the board denied the demolition of that garage, that can be appealed by the applicant. But what the code says is, within 20 days of the written decision by the Heritage Preservation Board to deny a certificate of approval, you appeal, and then it goes on to say that you appeal to the Board of Commissioners. So that concerned me. I just didn't think it was quite fair. Most other places, most other procedures, if there's an appeal, it's either side can appeal. So I just
Yeah.
want to throw that out and see what you guys thought about that. We can discuss it in more detail. I know it's getting late. We do have the ability as a board to make recommendations to the staff and to the city commission about changes to the code. And again, that one just kind of hit me because it was fairly recent. It was fairly controversial. So, I don't know. Think what you guys say?
Can
Do you
I?
wanna say something,
Yeah.
Mr. Gilla?
So, and I don't disagree with you that there probably needs to be some clarification within this section of the code. Under section B, it does say appeals from any decision of the Heritage Preservation Board shall be made to the Board of Commissioners. So,
Under section what?
under B, under appeals. So while A
Says it's an appeal from a technical review
No,
committee goes to the
continue.
preservation
keep going.
board.
The last sentence. Appeals from any decision of the Heritage Preservation Board shall be made to the Board of Commissioners. Now, from a legal standpoint, I think that would be sufficient, that if there was an affected party that came forward and there was something that was granted and they disagreed with it, that I think that that would be enough to provide them with an avenue for appeal. That's why I'm saying I think it does probably need to be clarified. So either it should say in section A, any decision of the Board of the Heritage Preservation Board, and then shall be appealed to the Board of Commissioners. So I think that one line needs to just be moved up into section A.
Yeah, and it needs to have, it's gotta have a time frame. You can't have the appeal period open forever. So
Well,
it's
right,
got
but
the
this,
20 days in
because
there,
this
so-
is section 111, it's all read together. So these are all conjunctive, not necessarily disjunctive, unless it otherwise says or. So from a legal statutory ordinance law construction aspect, these would all be read together. So but I also don't disagree with you that it needs to be clarified, because someone who's not a lawyer who's reading this is not going to necessarily know that and think, oh, well, you know, I don't have any recourse here without seeking legal counsel. So I would suggest that the last sentence in section B be moved into section A, and then in section A, where it says a written decision of the Heritage Preservation Board to deny, it should just say a written decision of the Heritage Preservation Board with regards to the certificate of approval. So instead of wherever it says deny, it should just be any decision or the decision.
What do y'all
I
think?
agree with
agree.
that, yeah.
So you
And
wanna
it
go
would
ahead
still
and-
be within 20 days.
Yes,
Right,
still has
nothing
to have
else
the
would
time frame.
change, unless you guys have other
I think-
discussion items that you want on this section.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
just,
good.
I mean, I did read that, but
Now, I will tell you, with that clarification and moving forward, I do think that that's going to make some, we didn't get any public comment tonight. and We don't usually get a ton of public comment. We do get a lot of support. But it may change how we determine who is considered an affected party. A lot of times, for the purposes of the record, if you're going to allow anyone to appeal a decision of the board of the Heritage Preservation Board, then we sit there and we say, okay, well, you know, we are going to grant this application, but John Doe over here doesn't want it. He came and stood there and said, I absolutely don't want this, but he doesn't live in Tarpon Springs. He lives in Palm Harbor.
Can you define affected party in that?
It's defined in the state statutes. Because remember, this is a quasi-judicial proceeding.
Right.
So there are statutory construction that govern how these meetings are run. Someone who is an affected party can appeal the decision of this board. So what I would state is that when we conduct our meetings, I think we need to be a little bit more vigilant if someone's coming out and speaking against it. If they say their address and their address happens to be right next door, usually they come out and say, I'm the next door neighbor of so-and-so. That's perfectly fine, because they're an affected party. They are directly affected by whatever happens with this property. But if they say, I live 3 streets down, now there's going to be a little bit more prying. Well, how are you affected by these changes? How is this going to impact your property values? Or is it a line of sight issue? Can you see, is it obstructing, whatever it happens to be. And that'll fall to me to be more vigilant about if somebody, comes up, I may have to sit there and inquire, well, tell me how you are affected by whatever happens at the end of this application. But knowing that that's going to be, when we make these changes, one, that should already be in place, but we haven't really had any of that. But moving forward with the clarification, I think that should also be something that the conduct of this board should be a little bit more tuned into.
Well, I think we do generally, if the person's on, if their address is on the same street where the application is, we kind of go, okay, I understand. But if they're not, I can't remember when there's been one that's not,
If
but
they're
we
It hasn't
living in
really
Newport
come up,
Ridge,
right?
really come up, and it's gonna depend on
The
this
circumstances.
particular site too, because there's some sites that are more important, individually more important than
Yeah.
others.
Well, would it be the people who were notified
No,
as
that does
considered
not.
part of
No.
the
That doesn't
affected area?
necessarily define who an affected party is. So there is a lot of case law out there that kind of describes what an affected party is, and it is honestly on a case-by-case basis. So, it could someone that lives, 2 streets over, and they're technically not an affected party based on whatever the application is before you, because it doesn't affect them. But it also could be somebody who's in 2 neighborhoods over, and it does affect them because it affects the entire historic district as a whole. So it's just something that needs to be brought up on a case-by-case basis, but I felt like this was a good grounds to kind of talk about that a little bit. It doesn't come up very often, but it may in the future, who knows?
So do we need to have a motion to direct staff to, or request the staff to make this revision and get that moving?
I think just consensus of the board. And what I can go ahead and do is I'll prepare a draft, and I'll have Kim send it out to everyone on the board, and then each individually do not hit reply all. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. It's really legislation. So, you can just just to be cautious, don't hit reply all.
Just in the email how to reply.
Right. And any questions, and then after I draft it and have Kim send it out, you can always call me or email me directly too, and we can discuss it as well. If you have any other further changes or whatnot, we can circulate that. But just a consensus, and then from there we'll go ahead and send it up the chain to get it to the board of
So
commissioners.
you'll have a draft in our March pack?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So do we have a consensus?
I say yes.
Consensus to
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Everybody's nodding their head. So I think that's a consensus for yes.
Yes.
Okay, anything else to come before us?
Just one final comment. I'd just like to thank Ms. McNeese for the thoroughness of the packages this
Yes.
month. I think that really made
They
our
were
job
really
easier.
great.
They're
Yeah.
really good.
And you had good participation by your applicants too.
Yeah.
And I would tell, if you can encourage in those applicants, the way that last application had the letter and then the numbers corresponding to the drawing, that
That was
Yes.
was
great.
really
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah,
Really was
that was
easy to
great.
follow what they were doing. So I would, if anybody ever asked you, do you have a sample? I would,
Okay. that's
seriously, I think
Great
that
idea.
helps
Thanks.
for me.
It was helpful.
Very helpful. Okay, anything else to come before the board tonight? Our next meeting is, let's see, March 4th? Is that right? March 4th? Yes, March 4th, 2019, we'll.
Wow.
Oh,
It's going by
At
fast.
station.
isn't it?
All right, thank you so much. We are adjourned now at 8:20.
Wow. It's going by really fast.